The Pentagon was also hit by a plane. The number of people dead could be in the thousands.
This is a vicious attack upon New York. It's an attack upon America. It's an attack upon the whole concept of freedom and our way of life. And we cannot let these attacks succeed.
New York Governor George Pataki will report on the World Trade Tower attacks and on the hijacking of 4 airliners.
We'll hear from those who witnessed the events in New York and at the Pentagon, talking with reporters and those affected by the blasts.
Also, how the U.S. could respond, and how today's attack on the United States might be seen over the scope of history.
That and more coming up in this special report from NPR News.
From NPR News in Washington, I'm Frank Stasio.
God bless America, my home sweet home. God bless America, my home sweet home.
Members of Congress gathered on the Capitol steps today, responding to the devastating terrorist attacks on American targets in New York and Washington. The coordinated attack today has flattened the World Trade Towers and destroyed a portion of the U.S. Pentagon. There were 4 hijacked commercial airliners involved in the plan. Attorney General John Ashcroft has just given the first details of the hijacking.
American Airlines Flight 11 departed Boston for Los Angeles, hijacked by suspects armed with knives. This plane crashed into the World Trade Center.
A short time later, a second hijacked airliner struck the other tower. Both towers later collapsed. Another tower at the World Trade Center complex has since crumbled. Many people had already been evacuated from lower Manhattan. Eyewitnesses are emerging. Chris Maloney of member station WFUV reports.
Thousands of people were at work in the World Trade Center today. Peter Little was one of them. Little worked in Tower 1 on the 78th floor. He describes what happened during this morning's attack.
Something of enormous weight, just struck the building and made it shudder and heave back and forth about 3 times to where you thought, oh my God, is it going to topple?
Little says the plane crashed into the tower just a few floors above his office and says the scene after the crash was chaotic. He says many of the occupants of Tower 1 managed to make it down to the street and fled the scene before the buildings collapsed. For NPR News, I'm Chris Maloney in New York.
Officials have been reluctant to estimate the number of dead and injured, but in New York, a vice president with the New York City Firefighters Union now says as many as 200 firefighters who first reached the scene may be dead. Mike Carter says we have entire companies that are just missing. We're going to have to bury a lot of people. Cardinal Edward Egan, who administered the last rites to dozens of victims, says the firefighters and police were dead in great numbers. NPR's Craig Wyndham says much of the nation's transportation system has been shut down as a precaution in the wake of the attacks.
The Federal Aviation Administration says the grounding of all commercial aircraft in the United States will not be lifted until at least noon tomorrow at the earliest. The total air travel shutdown is a first in U.S. history. Amtrak has temporarily halted all rail service along the heavily traveled Northeast Corridor. And Greyhound, the country's largest bus line, has ceased operation in the Northeast and more than 24 other locations where terminals are close to federal buildings.
Craig Wyndham reporting from Washington. President Bush is at the White House where he is scheduled to address the nation in about a half an hour. This is NPR News.
It's 5:04. Time now for Arizona News. I'm Nelson Warnell. Reports of traffic problems at this hour at the main gates of Davis-Monthan Air Force Base. Avoid Craycroft and Gulf Links. They'll be doing road closures in that area as a security measure because of the events on the East Coast today. Eastbound curb lane of Gulf Links will be the only entrance to DM. Today's terrorist attack spurred the opening of Tucson's Multi-Agency Emergency Operations Center. Tucson-Pima County Office of Emergency Management Director Dennis Douglas says at least 17 agencies and 30 people are manning the center to coordinate any needed emergency response in our community. He says the center will operate as long as necessary.
But we have to be sure to schedule our people to ensure that they're sharp, that they're ready to make decisions instantaneously. So we have to be concerned about fatigue and such. But we're here for the long run.
Douglas says the center is located in a secure area of the Pima County complex. The center is put into operation during times of severe floods, fires, and criminal activity.